Hello, in this video we are going to take a look at the intro into the terminal and also go over some vocab and see how the terminal works. So let's get to it. So with the terminal, as you may or may not know that every system has some sort of a terminal. Whether you're in Windows or you're inside of a Mac or Linux, there is some sort of a terminal on your machine. And it comes with your machine, so there's no extra download needed. With the terminal, you're able to do a bunch of functions, and we'll go over to see what those functions are. To access the terminal, there's a few ways you can access it. I'm on a Mac, so if you're on a Mac, go ahead and do a command space and type in terminal. If you're on a Windows or a Linux base, then it might be called command line instead. So anytime that I'm referring to a terminal, in your case, it would be command line, and they're both the same thing. This little window here, that is what the terminal is. So before we get started and see how this works and what we can do with it, let's actually go deep dive into what actually it is. I have a presentation here because I'm a little bit old fashioned, and let's go ahead and see what it is. So a terminal, by definition, is a program to interact with your computer using some sort of commands. But if you look at that definition, right, you're still a little bit confused. When I looked at this definition at first, it is very confusing because there's some of the keywords like commands, programs. Those are keywords that I didn't understand yet until I dive deeper into those definitions. So before we get started and break this down of what a terminal actually does, let's first go into some vocab. So here's some vocab to start off with. There are some things that are on the terminal, and then also there are some terminology that we'll be using when we are navigating around in the terminal. That's on the right here. So first, inside of the terminal, you'll see these items here. And when you first start off is that you will start to see a few things. First off is the prompt. A prompt is what is the start of the command line. That's when you are able to input at the beginning of all your commands. The cursor, and we'll be able to see this later, is very similar to a cursor in any other Word document, and it is where you can input your commands. That's what the cursor is. So a prompt is where you can start your command. A cursor is where you can type the commands. And then you're able to see the user, the login operator, whoever is logged in, or whatever user you're using, it will also show up inside of the terminal. And then finally, we get into what commands are. Commands are special words or special key phrases that you can use to run certain operations. And we'll go over those operations in another video. This is just a brief intro into them. And then oftentimes you'll hear the term CLI in the development world. What CLI is the abbreviation for command line interface. What the command line interface is a tool that you can use your terminal with to access certain types of applications and tool sets. And we'll go over what that is in the next video as well. So some key terms just to navigate around the terminal is directory. And directory is actually one of those words that sound hard, but it has a really easy meaning. And anytime that I'm saying directory, it's just folders. And what directory is that if you take a look at your system application, for example, inside of Mac, if you take a look at a Finder, you can see that if we go into our main applications, and then you can see all of your system folders, your system directories, you can see that all there is to a computer is just folders within files and programs. That's all your computer is made up of. It's just different directories, files, and programs. You can see that inside of the main directory here, mine is called down, you can see all of the directories, the system directories the computer comes with. And if you go into some of these directories, like the desktop, you can see there's even more directories, as well as different types of files and programs. So that's essentially how your computer is set up. It's a bunch of folders with a bunch of files and applications. Now, Depending on the file, it actually has different types of files, and you're probably seeing this around already. And what the files, sometimes you see files of PDF or doc or text. Those are just different file extensions. And what a file extension is it identifies what file type it is. When you are developing inside of a web document or any type of development field, you have to have a specific file extension to know what kind of language it is you're using. So that's what a file extension is. That is also how you can see certain files and what type of file they are. And then last is just applications. These are software programs that someone already built out. And a good example is that Spotify is one, QuickTime, the terminal, those are all applications that you can see and use. And those also make up what your computer is as well. So those are the vocab that we'll be going over when we start to dive into our terminal. The main one is directory. Again, those are just folders because all of our system is just folders. And also, we'll be seeing what these are inside of our terminal. So let's talk about how it works. So essentially, anytime that we type in a command, it actually transitions it and transforms it into a machine code, something that the computer can understand. And then with that machine code, it eventually boils down to binary, just ones and zeros. That way it will execute the command and do whatever is needed with that command. So why even use the terminal? Well, if you see here, if we go into our desktop, you're able to do almost anything a terminal is, right? Well, let's take a look. With the terminal, one of the things that we'll be doing is we'll be creating folders, directories, as well as files in those directories. But if you see here, we can create new folders, but when we go into the folder, we can't actually create a file. That has to be something that we have to create somewhere else. That is a good way to do it, but there's actually a better way to do it, and that's with the terminal. So with the terminal, you're actually able to do things a lot more faster and efficient. Things such as creating files and creating folders, as well as navigating into folders, those are actually a lot more efficient. If you go ahead and find a specific file on your system right now without using the terminal, you would have to go into your directory, and then inside of your directory, go into another directory, and then eventually navigate all the way down into your code, right? Into the file you want. That's fine, but it's not as fast. Inside of the terminal, you can actually, with some good practice, make it go a lot more faster and smooth. The other thing is that it's very great for development. There's certain things that you can do only in the terminal that you can't do inside of your system without any third-party tools, of course. So we'll be seeing what those are in the next video. And then there are some tools that you can get within the terminal, and there's some items that come with the terminal just straight out of the box, and other things that you can do to add on to your terminal use case. Things such as curl to make HTTP requests, and also a text editor with Vim and Nano. And inside of the Windows, it actually has a different type of system. It won't be using Vim or Nano, it'll be using whatever the system base is. And you can add in third-party CLI tools such as Git and other production stuff if you're using version history or pushing your items into production. So those are reasons why we would use a terminal, is that it will actually make our job a lot more efficient, and also it will give us the right use case for each of the individual programs that we'll be building later on. The next thing we'll be talking about is terminal emulators. So if you take a look at our current terminal, it's very boring, right? There's not a lot to it. You can't really customize it, and it's coming straight out of your system. And it's not really used a lot when you're developing. You'll most likely use something called a terminal emulator. Something that a terminal emulator does is that it's exactly like the terminal, but you're able to have more features with the terminal. For example, what I'm using here, I use iTerm, more specifically iTerm 2. And this allows you to customize your terminal and also gives it more color, makes it more customizable for your use case. And that's a little bit more of a user friendly thing to do because if you're looking at this terminal on and off for every single day, you'll start to get tired of it. And emulators actually spices things up. And all it is that it just emulates the terminal. And if you're using Mac, I would recommend using iTerm. If you're using Windows or Linux based, I would hook it up to Ubuntu and use Hyperterm. Those are good emulators that I would recommend. And essentially, they are all considered a terminal because they're emulating a terminal. They're exactly our terminals, and we'll be using them like terminals. So that's what emulator is. It allows you to boost into features that you would have, such as customizing your terminal base and seeing what you can do with them. So let's see what's next. So the next part is in our next video, we'll be taking a look at these certain items that we pointed out, what a cursor is, all those vocab inside of our terminal. And also we'll be checking out some commands that we'll be using and most common commands that we'll be having inside of our systems and our app development. So until next time, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.